Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Cha Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye Nashtaprayeshu Avadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 1, Text 56-57 onwards. So, Yamdutas are further speaking. Ayam hi Shrut Sampanna Shila Vritta Gunalaya Trita Vrito Mridurdanta Satyavang Mantra Vichuchi Gurvagni Atithi Vridhanam Shushrush Ankrita Sarvabhutsu Hrita Sadhur Matir Ivag Anasuya Kaha. So after describing dharma, adharma, and who gets punished, and what's the criteria for punishment, now Yamdutas are talking about, they said, Ayam. Ayam means this Brahman, this person. And basically they were very angry with Ajamil. They were like ready to beat him up. And they were still angry. But because of Vishnu Dutas, they could not do anything. So this Brahman, so translation. In the beginning, this Brahman named Ajamil studied all the Vedic literatures. He was a reservoir of good character and good conduct and good qualities, firmly established in executing all the Vedic injunctions. He was very mild and gentle, and he kept his mind and senses under control. Furthermore, he was always truthful. He knew how to chant the Vedic mantras, and he was always also very pure. Ajamil was very respectful to his spiritual master, the fire god, guests, and the elderly members of his household. Indeed, he was free from false prestige. He was upright, benevolent to all living entities, and well behaved. He would never speak nonsense or envy anyone. So he was such a gentle Brahman with good character, good conduct, good qualities. Purport. The order carriers of Yamraj, the Yamdutas, are explaining the factual position of piety and impiety and how a living entity is entangled in this material world. Describing the history of Ajamil's life, the Yamdutas relate that in the beginning, he was a learned scholar of the Vedic literature. He was well behaved, neat and clean, and very kind to everyone. In fact, he had all the good qualities. In other words, he was like a perfect Brahman. A Brahman is expected to be perfectly pious, to follow all the regulative principles, and to have all good qualities. The symptoms of piety are explained in these verses. Srila Veeraraghavacharya comments that Dhrita Vrita means Dhritam Vritam Stri Sangha Rahityam Brahmacharya Rupam. In other words, Ajamil followed the rules and regulations of celibacy as a perfect brahmachari and was very soft-hearted, truthful, clean, and pure. How he fell down in spite of all these qualities and thus came to be threatened with punishment by Yamraj will be described in the following verses. 58 to 60 text. Ekadaso vanam yata tri sandesh krid dvijaha adaya tat avrita fal pushpa samit kushan dadash kaminam kachrit kach shudram sah bhajishyaya pitvascha madhu mareyam mada ghurnit netraya matya vishla लथनीव्या व्यपेतम निरपत्रपम क्रीडंतम अनुगायंतम हसंतम अनयांतिके. Once this Brahman Ajamil, following the order of his father, went to the forest to collect fruit, flowers, and two kinds of grass called Samit and Kusha. On the way home, he came upon a Shudra, a very lusty fourth-class man, who was shamelessly embracing and kissing a prostitute. The Shudra was smiling, singing, and enjoying as if this were proper behavior. Both the Shudra and the prostitute were drunk. The prostitute's eyes were rolling in intoxication, and her dress had become loose. Such was the condition in which Ajamil saw them. While traveling along the public way, Ajamil came upon a fourth-class man and a prostitute who are vividly described here. Drunkenness was sometimes manifest even in bygone ages, although not very frequently. In this age of Kali, however, such sin is to be seen everywhere, for people all over the world have become shameless. Long ago, when he saw the scene of the drunken Shudra and the prostitute, Ajamil, who was a perfect brahmachari, was affected. Nowadays, such sin is visible in so many places, and we must consider the position of a brahmachari student who sees such behavior. For such a brahmachari to remain steady is very difficult unless he is extremely strong in following the regulative principles. Nevertheless, if one takes to Krishna consciousness very seriously, he can withstand the provocation created by sin. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we prohibit illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. In Kali Yuga, a drunk, half-naked woman embracing a drunk man is a very common sight, especially in the Western countries. Well, it's in India also, it's very common. And restraining oneself after seeing such things is very difficult. Nevertheless, if by the grace of Krishna one adheres to the regulative principles and chants the Hare Krishna mantra, Krishna will certainly protect him. Indeed, Krishna says that his devotee is never vanquished. Konteya pratijanihi, name bhakta pranashyati. Therefore, all the disciples practicing Krishna consciousness should obediently follow the regulative principles and remain fixed in chanting the holy name of the Lord. Then there need not be any fear. Otherwise, one's position is very dangerous, especially in this Kali Yuga. So Ajamil, ekda aso, once he saw that scene, and it was very rare to see such a scene on the roadside. A Shudra kissing a prostitute, and the prostitute's clothes became loose when she was drunk, eyes were rolling, and Ajamil, brahmachari, he was a pure brahmachari. He had gone to the forest to collect this grass, samit and kusha for the yagya, and he got bewildered. And this is a Prabhupada saying this is such a regular scene in this day and age that it has. I mean, one has to be very strict in his Krishna consciousness to be safe, to be on the safe side. Because mind always wants to go down. To keep it up, just like when the airplane is flying, so many forces are working on the airplane to pull it down. Gravitational forces there, and the lack of fuel can be there, or other things. But for it to keep flying, it has to have proper fuel and proper alignment with the wind. Even with the fuel, if it is not aligned properly, it will go down. So similarly is the mind. There are so many forces to pull it down, so many. But proper chanting, proper execution of devotional service has to be there every day to make sure it keeps flying. It stays up only. It doesn't go down. It stays in the mode of goodness or beyond. Text 61. Drishtva tam kamliptena bahuna parirambitam jagam hrichya vasham sahasa hridya vasham sahasa vimohita. The Shudra, his arm decorated with turmeric powder, was embracing this prostitute. When Ajamil saw her, the dormant, lusty desires in his heart awakened, and in illusion, he fell under their control. It is said that if one's body is smeared with turmeric, it attracts the lusty desires of the opposite sex. The word Kam Lipten indicates that the Shudra was decorated with turmeric smeared on his body. Well, we only knew the medicinal powers of turmeric. I didn't know about this part. Stambhayanatmanam yavat sattam yathashrutam na shashaka samadhatum mano madana vepitam. As far as possible, he patiently tried to remember the instructions of the Shastras, not even to see a woman. With the help of this knowledge and his intellect, he tried to control his lusty desires, but because of the force of Cupid within his heart, he failed to control his mind. Unless one is very strong in knowledge, patience, and proper bodily, mental, and intellectual behavior, controlling one's lusty desires is extremely difficult. Thus, after seeing a man embracing a young woman and practically doing everything required for sex life, even a fully qualified Brahman, as described above, could not control his lusty desires and restrain himself from pursuing them. Because of the force of materialistic life, to maintain self-control is extremely difficult unless one is specifically under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service. So that's what Prabhupada is saying. Maya is so strong, it is so difficult to control one's lusty desires. Those desires are there in everybody's heart. And this is what happened with Ajamil. He just could not control himself. Tannimitasma smaravyaja graho agrasto vichetana tameva manasa dhyayam swadharmad virarama. In the same way that the sun and moon are eclipsed by a low planet, the Brahman lost all his good sense. Taking advantage of this situation, he always thought of the prostitute, and within a short time, he took her as a servant in his house and abandoned all the regulative principles of a Brahman. So he just brought the same prostitute in his house and took her as a servant. By speaking this verse, Shukdev Goswami wants to impress upon the mind of the reader that Ajamil's exalted position as a Brahman was vanquished by his association with prostitutes, so much so that he forgot all his Brahminical activities. Nevertheless, at the end of his life, by chanting the 4 syllables of the name Narayan, he was saved from the gravest danger of falling down. Even a little devotional service can save one from the greatest danger. Devotional service, which begins with chanting the holy name of the Lord, is so powerful that even if one falls down from the exalted position of a Brahman through sexual indulgence, he can be saved from all calamities if he somehow or other chants the holy name of the Lord. This is the extraordinary power of the Lord's holy name. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, it is advised that one not forget the chanting of the holy name, even for a moment. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantasya jadavirta. Satatam, always. There are so many dangers in this material world that one may fall down from an exalted position at any time. Yet if one keeps himself always pure and steady by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, he will be safe without a doubt. So Ajamil brought the same prostitute home and he kept her as a servant. And he forgot all the Brahminical qualities or principles of Brahman. Tameva toshe amasa pitrenarthena yavata gramyar manoramah kame prasideta yathatapa Thus Ajamil began spending whatever money he had inherited from his father to satisfy the prostitute with various material presentations so that she would remain pleased with him. He gave up all his Brahminical activities to satisfy the prostitute. There are many instances throughout the world in which even a purified person being attracted by a prostitute spends all the money he has inherited. Prostitute hunting is so abominable that the desire for sex with a prostitute can ruin one's character, destroy one's exalted position, and plunder all one's money. Therefore, illicit sex is strictly prohibited. One should be satisfied with the married wife, for even a slight deviation will create havoc. A Krishna-conscious grihastha should always remember this. He should always be satisfied with one wife and be peaceful simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Otherwise, at any moment, he may fall down from his good position, as exemplified in the case of Ajamil. So, and to satisfy the prostitute, it's not easy because their demands are so much, so high. And he practically he spent all the money he had inherited from his father. Vipram svabharyam pronam kule mahati lambitam visasarjati chirat papa swarenya pang vidabdhi. Because his intelligence was pierced by the lustful glance of the prostitute, the victimized Brahmana Ajamil engaged in sinful acts in her association. He even gave up the company of his very beautiful young wife who came from a very respectable Brahman family. Customarily, everyone is eligible to inherit his father's property, and Ajamil also inherited the money of his father. But what did he do with the money? Instead of engaging the money in the service of Krishna, he engaged it in the service of a prostitute. Therefore, he was condemned and was punishable by Yamaraj. How did this happen? He was victimized by the dangerous, lustful glance of a prostitute. This is how serious it is and how sinful it is. And he not only was trying to satisfy the prostitute, he gave up the company of his very beautiful young wife. He just sent her to his parents' house. Yatas tatas chop ninye nyayato anyayato dhanam vabharasya kutumbinya kutumbam mandadhirayam. Although born of a Brahman family, this rascal, now Yamdutas are getting really angry. This rascal, bereft of the intelligence because of the prostitutes association, earned money somehow or other, regardless of whether properly or improperly, and used it to maintain the prostitutes' sons and daughters. Now that's statement that we should look into. All the Prabhupada didn't write a purport on this one. So Shukdev Goswami is saying, so he earned the money properly or improperly, somehow, but he earned the money very sinfully actually. And he used it to maintain the prostitutes' sons and daughters. He didn't say his sons and daughters. So Ajamil didn't even know whose actually sons and daughters were they. Maybe because the prostitute, it's very difficult to keep her happy with one man. So maybe behind Ajamil's back, she was going out. But whatever sons and daughters were born, it was born in the house of Ajamil. And Ajamil had to maintain them. Yadaso shastram ulanghya swara charyate garhita avartat chiram kalam aghayur ashuchir amala. This Brahman irresponsibly spent his long lifetime transgressing all the rules and regulations of the Holy Scriptures, living extravagantly and eating food prepared by a prostitute. Therefore, he is full of sins. He is unclean and is addicted to forbidden activities. Food prepared by an unclean, sinful man or woman, especially a prostitute, is extremely infectious. Ajamil ate such food, and therefore he was subject to be punished by Yamraj. See, jaisa dhan, jaisa an, vaisa man. It is definitely there. Now, it's not that the prostitute cannot become a devotee. It's never meant. Just like Haridas Thakur also turned a prostitute into a devotee, Bill Mangal Thakur's guru, or Shiksha Guru, who was a prostitute, actually, he used to go to this prostitute. Later, she chastised Bill Mangal Thakur, and then Bill Mangal Thakur took that chastisement to his heart and came to Vrindavan. But while conducting that while living that kind of life, it is very sinful. Now, in modern days, people will say, oh, somehow a person has to live, a person has to maintain his body, so any activity is not sinful. And this. But the point is, to maintain the body, we don't have to commit sinful activity. Krishna will provide if we want to stick to the proper occupation. Krishna will provide. Definitely, he will provide. So that kind of sinful activity one doesn't have to get into. But so she was preparing food and he was eating. So that is again more sinful, and his consciousness was completely polluted. Tat enam dandapane sakasham krit kilvisham neshyamo akrit nirvesham yatra dandena shuddhyati. This man, Ajamil, did not undergo any atonement. Therefore, because of his sinful life, we must take him into the presence of Yamaraj for punishment. There, according to the extent of his sinful acts, he will be punished and thus purified. The Vishnu Dutas had forbidden the Yamdutas to take Ajamil to Yamaraj, and therefore the Yamdutas explained that taking such a man to Yamaraj was appropriate. Since Ajamil had not undergone atonement for his sinful acts, he was to be taken to Yamaraj to be purified. When a man commits murder, he becomes sinful, and therefore he must also be killed. Otherwise, after death, he must suffer many sinful reactions. Similarly, punishment by Yamaraj is a process of purification for the most abominable, sinful persons. Therefore, the Yamdutas requested the Vishnudutas not to obstruct their taking Ajamil to Yamaraj. So they have given all the logics, all the knowledge, and all the activities that Ajamil did, all the sinful activities that he did. But only thing they failed to notice that Ajamil chanted the name of Narayan, even though he named his son as Narayan. But regardless, he chanted the name of Narayan. So there ends the first chapter of 6th canto, and we can start the second chapter tomorrow. See, anybody has any questions or comments?
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, धन्यवाद प्रणाम।
हरे कृष्ण, धन्यवाद प्रणाम।
प्रभु जी, इसका मतलब क्या समझे, मतलब इस वर्ड्स जो आपने एक्सप्लेन किया है, इसका सारांश अगर समझना चाहे तो मतलब क्या समझे कि अजामिल के साथ जो भी हुआ है वो अचानक से मतलब उनके बेटे का ही नाम लिया था, but intention was not to remember Lord Krishna. And he was just taking the name of his son, but still he got the abode of Lord Krishna's dham. I mean, so हमें क्या समझना चाहिए इससे?
First of all, dham nahi hai. He didn't achieve that dham. That will come later on. समझना ये चाहिए कि Krishna is very, very merciful, but we cannot take for granted that we would be able to chant the way Ajamil did. So we cannot commit sinful activity, and but the holy name is very, very powerful. So we should try to continuously chant.
So being a parent, no one should think like that. I have attachment for my children, so I will keep my child's name as Ram or this and that, so that during my last breath, at least if not the Lord's name, I can take my son's or daughter's name, like that. So we should not think like that.
Well, the thought should not be like that, that, okay, Ajamil got the mercy and I'll also get the mercy. Maybe we'll not get the mercy.
Yes, so
because
this is for
Ajamil was a very pure Brahman in his youth, and he did lots of service to the Lord. And that is in return, at the end, he got the mercy. We might not be that successful.
Yes, Prabhuji. Actually, whatever practice we are doing, just to prepare for the death only, because death is so painful that if we'll not practice taking Lord's name constantly, during that painful situation, we forget everything totally. So.
Oh yeah. So those unit tests will always be there to remind us where are we at.
Thank you so much.
So, thank you. Okay, so I guess we can stop here. You all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.